I personally identify as mixed race. My dad is from Hungary and my mom is from Yemen, so I've got like Arab and white / Eastern European in me, and I think I have grown up really confused in, my racial identity. I think that people are generally pretty confused, but as I get older, I've learned to embrace it and feel comfortable, like being kind of I don't know if unambiguous is a word, but yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Hello Gen Z, a podcast from the San Diego Union-Tribune. I'm Abby Hamblin, here with my co-host Kristy Totten, and you just heard Yali Livni, a college student from Los Angeles.
So in the last episode, we talked about belonging and how young people are using the internet to forge connections. In this episode, we're going to take a look at another side of belonging.
Gen Z is the most diverse generation yet, with nearly half identifying as racial or ethnic minorities. They're also demographically unique because they're more multiracial than previous generations.
And few of them are immigrants themselves, but they're more likely than other generations to have at least one foreign-born parent. That's because of a major increase in immigration that started in the 1970s and peaked in 2005. So that's what we're going to talk about this episode, what it's like to be multiracial and what it's like to be a first-generation American.
The mixed race part is kind of self-explanatory. The country is more diverse than ever, and mixed-race marriages are more common than ever. About 7% of the country is multiracial now, with the highest numbers in California and Hawaii.
In 2010, just a decade ago, only 2.9% of Americans identified as multiracial. That means it's more than doubled in the last 10 years.
The census is key to how we look at demographics in this country, and as the United States has changed, the census has changed many times too. The very first census in 1790 only had 3 options: free whites, all other free persons, and slaves. By the way, you may have noticed on this podcast, we always say race and ethnicity. That's because you'll often hear demographics researchers reporting both at the same time.
Here's Kim Parker, the Director of Social Trends Research at the Pew Research Center.
We sort of do what the Census Bureau does in terms of the way that they measure racial and ethnic identity. So the census asks about these things separately. They ask, are you of Hispanic origin? And then they ask, what is your race? So people who are Hispanic are also asked their race, and we know that some Hispanic people identify as white, some as black, some sort of volunteer that their race is Hispanic. So race means different things to different people, and so it's just sort of a cleaner way. We wouldn't want to... Hispanics overlay the white and black racial categories, so that's why we look at them separately.
Right, so race relates to skin color and other physical features, while ethnicity is based on your heritage, history, and ancestry. So, for example, I'm biracial because I'm Asian and white, my nationality is American, and my ethnicity includes a few groups, but mostly Vietnamese and German. But like Kim said, these terms really do mean different things to different people.
We've talked about the big picture view of demographics, like the numbers and the trends, but this episode is about what those numbers look like in real life and what Gen Z is already experiencing. The census only added a multiracial box in 2000, and 7% still isn't a huge percentage of the population. So we wanted to ask multiracial young people about their experiences. What is it like to be mixed race?
Overall, most members of Gen Z said being mixed race can be confusing to navigate, but they also said they were proud of their heritage and that it gave them a unique perspective.
This is Stanford student Ana de Almeida Amaral, who identifies as American-born Mexican and Portuguese.
I think like the most immediate experiences are about like feeling very othered in like all the places that I am a part of. And so like here in the United States, like the question of like, what are you? And I'm like, what do you mean, what am I? Or where are you from? No, like, where are you really from? And so that kind of othering here. And then when I go to Mexico, again, like the criticisms about like my ability to speak Spanish, and also just like cultural aspects. One of my like fondest memories of feeling othered was one time I was like with my cousin and his friends, and one of his friends was like, do you like Drake? And I was like, yeah, like I like Drake. And he's like, because every gringa likes Drake. And gringa means like every American girl likes Drake. And I was like, I'm not a gringa. Like, I'm not just like some American girl. Like, I'm Mexican. And he was like, no, but like every gringa likes Drake. And I was like, okay. And so like that kind of assumption about again, like that othering in Mexico, which I feel like at the time it was like a really distressful experience. But now I have so much pride and like gratitude to be a biracial person.
M. Valladolid, who you heard from in our last episode explaining non-binary pronouns, is also multiracial. Here's their experience.
My racial identity is very muddled. I am Afro-Latinx, and exploring my Afro-Latinidad in both Black and Latino spaces that don't always want to like overlap is very tricky. Just because like when I'm in Black spaces, it's you're not light, you're too light, you don't look like us. And when I'm in a lot of the Latino spaces, it's like, oh, you don't look like us, you kind of do but you don't. And it's always that like in between. And like when I was younger, my family like always kind of messed with me. And like when I was so I'm Puerto Rican and Mexican, and in the Puerto Rican is all of the, colonization with the Spaniards, the slave trade, and the intersection of just all of those different things, and the murder of the Taino natives, like all of that encapsulates like the Puerto Rican experience. So they're like the Afro part of my Afro-Latinidad, and I'm also Mexican and Chicano. So when I'm with my Mexican side, it's always, they used to call me Negrita, which is like dark. And when I was with like my Puerto Rican family, they would call me Blanquita because and that also means light. So it was just very weird as a kid because like I knew what I was. I didn't know the intersections of Afro-Latinidad yet, but like just growing up, I was very confused just because I don't look like either side. And, society is just so black and white. And that was just really confusing as a child. And now I'm starting to navigate through it in my adult life. And it's a little easier, but I still get the stigma of like, you're not blank enough or you're too much of blank. And it's a lot to handle. But I'm starting to see, especially with the media, a lot of like traction going toward mixed race people and specifically Afro-Latinos.
Yeah, there's a lot more visibility for people of color in the media these days. Senator Kamala Harris of California is mixed race, and she just became the first Black woman and the first person of Indian descent to be on a major party's presidential ticket.
Right, and as for members of Gen Z, there are mixed race stars like Zendaya Coleman, who is of African, German, and Scottish descent, and Bella Hadid, whose parents are Dutch and Palestinian.
So far, we've heard about the challenges of being mixed race, but there are positives too. Ryan Roden, a San Diego college student who is Korean and Sicilian, sees it both ways.
I'd say it's a double-edged sword, if that analogy is correct, actually. Because while I do believe that this allows many, many people to engage with issues in more formative ways, when you are racially mixed and when you come from different cultures and different ethnicities, and when both of those parts of yourself are active in the way in which you live life, you're forced to learn. When you're half black, half white, you start to realize you're not treated the same way as other white kids. When you're half Latino, half Asian, you start to realize that you're not looked at the same way as a pure blood, Eastern Asian kid. Like when you're mixed and when you live in a mixed community, you begin to see the ways in which worlds work in different ways from your own and how it specifically changes the way the world looks at you.
So yeah, being mixed has unique challenges, like constantly having to answer the question, what are you? But it can also be a good thing. By not exactly fitting in anywhere racially, it can mean you fit in everywhere.
So if we're talking about Generation Z, it's important to talk about how immigration is essential to who they are as a generation. Compared to other generations, members of Gen Z are less likely to be immigrants themselves, but more likely to have immigrant parents.
That's because we saw a lot of immigration by Asian and Hispanic people since the 1970s, but that peaked in 2005 and has decreased since the Great Recession. Here's Kim Parker from the Pew Research Center.
So a large share of Generation Z are actually the children of immigrants. About 7% of them are immigrants themselves, but 22% of them have at least one foreign-born parent, and that's significantly higher than what we saw with millennials and certainly much higher than what we saw with Gen X or baby boomers when they were this age.
Of course, everyone in the U.S., aside from Native Americans, are immigrants, but the recent wave of diverse immigrants is literally changing what it means to be an American as we've known it for generations. We talked to a couple students about being the children of immigrants, and here's one take from Veronica Zermino. She's a young Mexican-American woman from Oakland, California, and her mother is undocumented.
She talked to us about how she struggled to fit in and feel comfortable in a predominantly white community here in San Diego County.
I didn't get it. I didn't understand, like, oh, I look a lot different than these people. Like, I stand out because I have dark hair, dark eyebrows. I sound like this. So there was that. It was like with my friends in Mexico, or not my friends in Mexico, like my Mexican friends, we're make a lot of jokes about like being Mexican, and we throw these like words around like beaner, wetback, all this stuff. And then when I'm in La Jolla, it's like, oh, I feel like I am the beaner, I am the wetback, like this is who I am. So that was really that's really like hurtful. Just you like just knowing that you stand out, and knowing that there are people out there who don't want your parents here. That's like something that was really hard for me to grasp, like really hard for me to understand, because like I grew up in the Bay and everyone there is like brown, and like the white people are cool with it. They're, you know, it's hard to come here knowing that like it's very like opposite sides of the room. Like it's like you got white people and then you have everybody else, and I don't, that to me it's like scary. That's scary. I don't feel safe. I don't feel like I can just roll up with my friends, because I feel like everywhere I go I'm being looked at like I'm a criminal, or like I'm an undocumented immigrant, or that I'm like my parents are like, you know, the things that this like president is saying that they are, like rapists and drug dealers and all this stuff, and I feel like an outsider. So there's that. And then there's like going back to like Mexico, like my friends in Mexico, my friends who are Mexican, I made it out the hood, so now I'm like weta, now I'm white, now I'm, you know, I'm in La Jolla living that like white dream. That it's just like, who am I? Like, what am I doing then? What am I doing wrong? It's so scary.
And here's Oliver Kovarik, a young man who is the child of an immigrant but thinks legal immigration should be limited.
Yeah, no, my father, he arrived from Sweden, I think in the early 90s. I forget the exact year, 1992, 1993, something like that.
So like as a son of an immigrant, how do you feel about even curtailing legal immigration?
I don't really have any qualms with it. I mean, I consider myself an American. Just as a descriptor, it's useful to say Swedish American, but in terms of my identity, I'm wholly American. So when I'm looking at political issues, I'm looking at them as an American. I'm not looking at them, oh, I'm a legal immigrant. No, I'm an American. I was born and raised here as well, so it's not even that I was a naturalized immigrant.
No, I understand that, but just the idea that if this policy had been in place in the 90s, your father couldn't have come here. Like, how do you, like, I don't know. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, to be frank with you, my reaction is not really much. I mean, we just wouldn't have been here, I mean, and that's the case for, it's always, when you break down immigration in particular and you're looking at it, I think we have, over 1 million legal entries. And I don't know the estimation on illegal entries. But I mean, if you're going to ask anyone, Republican or otherwise, if you break that down to an individual issue and you say, okay, here we have a family from Honduras. Their lives are being threatened by cartels there. Their father was threatened and severely injured. They're seeking asylum into the United States. Are you sure you don't have room for 3 more people? If you break it down to an individual issue for everybody, I don't know that anyone has the heart to say, no, I'm sorry, we don't have room. But that's why you have broad policy making. Yeah, of course I'd admit that, if these moratoriums existed 20 or 30 years ago, as I think they should have, my family would not be in the United States. But it's not an issue. I mean, it should not be a personal issue for me. And it's important that people understand that they can sort of divorce their personal connections and their individual connections to policy if they want to make effective policy.
Let's hear from Yali Livni again. He's unique in that he's mixed race and an immigrant. I asked him if he thought diversity was a good thing for the country.
I mean, as an immigrant, I have to say, like, yes, of course. For my personal experience, yes, because in like white American spaces, I've never really felt totally comfortable or accepted, and always ousted sometimes as a joke, but it's never very comfortable when someone's like, oh, well, y'all, you're like this, or, you know, what do you think about this, or yeah, y'all, you don't really understand because whatever. Even though I've been here for so long and I, you know, feel like I know American things, so I feel like I should also have a say in what it's like to be an American, but I guess it's different. And in more diverse spaces, I've felt solidarity and difference. So I know that, you know, even if my experience isn't totally the same with other people, I know and they know that we have some experiences that are not like the norm, and that definitely helps me in general feel more comfortable and accepted.
So what does all this mean? Bill Fry is a demographer who wrote the book Diversity Explosion, and he thinks this blending of races might even change the way we view race in America.
Yeah, I think this is really an open question because, you know, the way the Census Bureau and government agencies and marketers define race today may no longer be relevant even 10 years from now, maybe even sooner, as there are more people sort of define themselves maybe by the way of their parental heritage. We know there are a lot of white Hispanic marriages, so the question is, well, are those children who are children in white Hispanic families, are they going to call themselves mixed race? Are they going to call themselves Hispanic? Are they going to call themselves white? So that's kind of an open question.
The 2020 census really reflects how times have changed and the census has changed with them. For example, this was the first year participants who marked Black or African American or white were given the option to share additional information. According to the Census Bureau itself, people who mark white could be French, Egyptian, Iranian, Chaldean, and Italian. People who marked Black or African American could be Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian, and South African.
We're in another census year now, and it's being stressed as super important for everyone to participate so that each state gets an equitable share of congressional seats and federal funding. And that conversation has, of course, been amplified in a post-George Floyd world.
The future of this country is diverse, and most people we talked to from Gen Z said that's a good thing. Here's Veronica Zermino again.
I think that we are going in the right direction, being so diverse, and that just the fact that we're all, I don't know how to explain it, like we all have like different upbringings, different parents, things are being more accepted. I feel like it's not as looked down upon if you have like mixed babies or something like that. So I think that that's a good thing.
Thanks for listening to Hello Gen Z, a podcast from the San Diego Union-Tribune. Please subscribe and rate us on your favorite app, and if you have a little extra time, we'd love to read your review.
This podcast was produced by me, Abby Hamblin, and Kristy Totten. Matthew T. Hall is our project editor, Beto Alvarez is our creative director, John Kelly is our video and graphics editor, and Gloria Orbegozo made our logo. Outro music on this episode and the last one is by Jeremy Klowicki.
Thanks again for listening, and we hope you join us next week for a look into how the coronavirus pandemic is changing Gen Z's future and affecting their mental health. See you next time.